I was done with my husband. The man who once promised me forever now felt like a complete stranger living under my roof. I had the divorce papers printed, hidden in my nightstand drawer, ready to sign. But just 1 week before I planned to leave him, I discovered what he'd been hiding from me. And when I found out the truth, it didn't just break my heart. It completely destroyed me. My name is Rachel. I'm 34 years old, and I live in a quiet suburb outside Charlotte, North Carolina. 7 years ago, I married the love of my life. His name is Mark. Mark wasn't just any man. He was a Marine. He served 2 tours overseas, places I still can't fully pronounce, places that changed him in ways I'll never truly understand. When he came home the first time, he was different. Quieter. More distant. But I told myself it was normal. That he just needed time to adjust. We got married 6 months after his second deployment ended. It was a small ceremony. Just our families. He looked so handsome in his uniform. When he said his vows, his hands were shaking. I thought it was because he was nervous. Now I realize it was something else entirely. For the first couple of years, we were okay. Not perfect, but okay. We had a son, Jacob. He's 5 now. The most beautiful little boy you've ever seen, with his father's dark eyes and my stubbornness. But as Jacob grew, Mark seemed to pull further and further away. He'd sit on the back porch every evening after work, staring at nothing. He barely touched his dinner. Barely spoke to me. Barely played with our son. When I'd ask him what was wrong, he'd just say, "I'm fine, Rach. Just tired." But I knew. I knew he wasn't fine. It started small. He'd leave the house without explanation. Running errands, he'd say. But he'd be gone for hours. He stopped coming to bed at the same time as me. I'd wake up at 2 in the morning and find him downstairs, sitting in the dark. Our intimacy disappeared. Not just physically. Emotionally, too. It felt like I was living with a ghost. My friends noticed. At a girls' brunch one Saturday, my best friend Claire looked me dead in the eye and said, "Rachel, honey, you deserve better than this. Veteran or not, no man should make you feel invisible." I wanted to defend him. But deep down I couldn't. Because she was right. I did feel invisible. Then came the envelope. I was doing laundry one Tuesday afternoon. Mark had left his jacket draped over the chair. When I picked it up, something fell out of the pocket. A sealed envelope. Addressed in his handwriting. To someone named Sarah Mitchell. My stomach dropped. I didn't open it. I couldn't. But I stood there staring at that name for what felt like an eternity. Who was Sarah Mitchell? Why was my husband writing to another woman? And why was he hiding it from me? I wanted to confront him. But I was terrified of the answer. So instead, I started paying closer attention. Watching him. Noticing things. The way he'd check his phone and quickly close it when I walked into the room. The way he'd avoid eye contact when I asked about his day. The way he'd flinch when I touched his shoulder. I felt like I was going crazy. Like I was living in some twisted mystery where my own husband was the stranger I couldn't trust. One night, I finally broke. Jacob had asked Mark to play catch outside. Mark said he was too tired. Our 5-year-old son looked up at his father with those big, hopeful eyes, and Mark just walked away. Jacob's little face crumpled. And something inside me snapped. That night, after Jacob went to bed, I told my sister everything. She didn't sugarcoat it. "Rachel, if he won't talk to you and he's hiding things from you, maybe it's time to let him go. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved." I cried myself to sleep that night. And when I woke up, I made a decision. I was going to file for divorce. I printed the papers on a Thursday morning. Mark had already left for work. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I couldn't drink and stared at those documents. Petition for divorce. Irreconcilable differences. It felt so cold. So final. But I told myself it was the right thing to do. For me. For Jacob. Maybe even for Mark. I didn't tell him right away. I needed to be sure. I needed to find the courage. 3 days later, on Sunday evening, I finally said it. Mark was sitting on the back porch again. Staring at the sky like he always did. I walked out there, papers in hand, and sat down beside him. "Mark," I said quietly. "I can't do this anymore." He didn't look at me. Just kept staring straight ahead. "I know," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. "I love you," I continued, my voice shaking. But I feel like I don't even know you anymore. You won't talk to me. You won't let me in. And I can't keep living like this. He finally turned to look at me. And the sadness in his eyes. God, it broke me. If leaving is what you need to be happy, Rachel, he said softly, then I understand. I wanted him to fight for me. To beg me to stay. To tell me he'd change. But he didn't. He just stood up, walked inside, and left me sitting there alone. That silence felt like confirmation. Like guilt. Like proof that I was making the right decision. The next morning, Mark left early. He said he had some things to take care of. I spent the day packing up some of his belongings. Not everything. Just enough to make space. To start separating our lives. As I was going through his dresser drawer, I found it again. The envelope. The one addressed to Sarah Mitchell. This time, I opened it. My hands were shaking as I unfolded the letter inside. It wasn't a love letter. It was an apology. Dear Mrs. Mitchell, I don't know if this letter will bring you any comfort, but I needed you to know, your son was my brother in arms. He was one of the bravest men I've ever known. I think about him every single day. I think about the last time we spoke. The last joke he told. The way he talked about you and his little sister. I'm sorry I made it home and he didn't. I carry that with me everywhere I go. If there's ever anything I can do for you or your family, please don't hesitate to reach out. You have my deepest respect and my eternal gratitude for raising such an incredible man. Sincerely, Mark Henderson. I couldn't breathe. I sat down on the floor, still holding the letter, and started going through the rest of the drawer. There were more. Dozens of them. Letters to the families of soldiers Mark had served with. Men who didn't make it home. Each one was handwritten. Each one was personal. Each one was filled with pain, guilt, and love. And then I found the notebook. It was leather-bound, worn at the edges. Inside were pages and pages of names. Dates. Stories. Mark had been writing about every single person he'd lost. Every mission. Every moment that haunted him. He'd also been volunteering. I found receipts. Donations to veteran organizations. Registration forms for support groups he'd been attending. He wasn't cheating on me. He was grieving. He was carrying the weight of every person he couldn't save. And he didn't know how to tell me. I felt like the worst person in the world. All this time I'd been so focused on my own pain, my own loneliness, that I'd completely missed his. I thought he was pulling away from me. But really he was drowning. And he didn't want to drag me down with him. I didn't file the papers. That evening, I sat on the back porch and waited for him. When his truck pulled into the driveway, I saw him hesitate before getting out. Like he was bracing himself for more bad news. But when he walked around to the backyard and saw me sitting there, I didn't say anything. I just stood up and hugged him. At first, he was stiff. Unsure. But then I felt his body start to shake. And for the first time since he'd come home from war, my husband broke down in my arms. He cried. Deep, gut-wrenching sobs that came from somewhere so broken, I didn't know how he'd been holding it together all this time. I'm sorry, he kept saying. I'm so sorry, Rachel. I didn't want you to see me like this. I didn't want you to have to carry this too. I held him tighter. You don't have to carry it alone, I whispered. That's what marriage means. We carry it together. We sat on that porch until the sun came up. And we talked. Really talked. He told me about the nightmares. The guilt. The faces he couldn't forget. The sounds that still woke him up in the middle of the night. He told me about the support group he'd been attending. How he'd been learning to process his trauma. How he'd been writing letters to honor the men he'd lost. He told me he knew he'd been distant. That he'd been trying to protect me from his pain, but in the process, he'd hurt me anyway. And I told him the truth too. That I'd felt abandoned. Invisible. That I'd almost given up on us. But that I didn't want to anymore. We made a promise that night. To be honest. To ask for help. To stop hiding from each other. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was messy and raw and real. But it was ours. Looking back now, I realize how close I came to walking away from the man I love. Not because he didn't care, but because I didn't understand. Sometimes the people who seem the most distant are the ones fighting the hardest just to survive. They're not pushing you away because they don't love you. They're trying to protect you from the darkness they're living in. And I almost let that silence destroy us. Love isn't always easy. It isn't always clear. And it doesn't always look the way we think it should. But it's strongest when we choose to stay. When we choose to listen. When we choose to carry the weight together, even when we don't fully understand it. Mark and I are still healing. We're in therapy now. Both together and individually. Some days are harder than others. But we're learning. Growing. Fighting for each other instead of against each other. And our son, Jacob? He has his dad back. Not the perfect version. But the real one. The one who's learning to be present, even when it's hard. That's all any of us can do, really. Show up. Even when it's messy. If you've ever been in a relationship where you felt invisible, or if you've ever judged someone before knowing their full story, you're not alone. I almost made the biggest mistake of my life because I couldn't see past my own pain. What would you have done in my place? Drop a comment below. I read every single one. And if this story touched you, please share it. You never know who might need to hear it today.